I'm here now with President Kim Clark. President Clark, simply put, is a world-famous economist, businessman, educator, and leader. Kim attended Brigham Young University and received his bachelor's, master's, and PhD from Harvard Business School. He was a professor for the institution for 18 years until he became Dean of Harvard Business School in 1995. He served as Dean at Harvard Business School for 10 years until he was invited to become the president of Brigham Young University-Idaho. During his 10 years at BYU Idaho, he developed and implemented online classes that provided education to thousands of students across the globe. President Clark also served as the commissioner of the church education system for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and worked to create an entirely virtual and innovative online university called BYU Pathway Worldwide. He says he now has his dream job at Brigham Young University, teaching master's students and mentoring many others. President Clark, thank you for joining us today. We're excited to hear from you.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
Many universities and businesses are trying to not only navigate global business, but are trying to figure out how to create online education and effective like virtual classrooms across the globe. I guess while you were president at BYU Idaho, you created a pretty robust online education system. And then a few years later, created an entirely new online virtual global university called BYU Pathway Worldwide, which now actually teaches about 50,000 students in roughly 150 different countries across the globe. We'd love to hear your story about how you were able to do that.
Okay. I discovered at BYU Idaho, there was a long-standing vision that someday that university would take education beyond the campus. And there had been some work done to already kind of begin to think about how to do that. And so when I got there, I was really immersed in thinking about its future and how it should work. And in my inaugural address, which I gave in October of 2005, I said some things that are to this day really near and dear to my heart, because I had this picture in my mind of little children. So this is 2005, little kids who were in what we call primary in the church, which is the program for children. And I felt strongly they would make sacred covenants with the Lord. The Lord desired to bless them. And one of those blessings was education. So I saw BYU Idaho playing a role in taking education beyond the campus to people all across the world. So we set to work and we had some very powerful discussions of strategy, like how we're going to use technology, what role online learning would play in the university. And those took place in 2007. In 2008, we set up a team of people, including, by the way, 2 future presidents of BYU Idaho and now the president of BYU Pathway Worldwide, Clark Gilbert, who were on that team. And they interviewed lots of young adults in different parts of the country. And our focus at that time was on, let's take education to people who don't have opportunity, who are not able to come to our campus or really are not on any other campus either. So people who are not in college, not getting education beyond high school. Well, they went out and they interviewed lots of young adults. And what they found was there were 2 factors that were keeping people away from pursuing education. One was fear. They were afraid that they didn't have what it takes to do the work. Many of them had been told that by high school counselors, which I can't believe, but it's true. Their high school counselor said, you're not cut out for college, don't go. And sometimes their families didn't support them. So one thing was fear, the other was cost. They looked at the cost of even being an in-resident student. So like at the University of Utah at that time, 10, 12 years ago, it costs you, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 a year to go to college. And they just couldn't imagine spending that much money. Many of them were from poor families. They just didn't have the resources. And so cost and fear loomed really large. And the team designed a program to attack both of those barriers so that they really just eliminate those barriers and get people into an educational program in which they could really thrive. So what I'd like to do for just a minute is share with you the kind of key decisions we made at BYU Idaho that in the design of Pathway that really have stood the test of time. The decisions have pretty well stayed in place and really define the nature of this program. And as I share them with you, you'll see how different this program was. We set out to really, in a way, reinvent higher education so that it could be accessible to lots and lots of people. So the first item was we decided, well, of course, we're going to use online courses with online adjunct instructors who had advanced degrees and were trained and supervised. So the idea was these are going to be semester-based courses. They're going to be cohort-based, meaning this is not independent study. You're going to take your course like you do on campus in a section with a group of people you're going to get to know. They're also going to be designed according to what we call the BYU Idaho learning model. And that's a model of learning, a framework for learning that emphasizes individual responsibility to really take action. You're responsible for your own education. You have your faith, you have the Holy Spirit to help you, and you have great content and great faculty. But you're responsible. And then we also built in this idea that we need to love, serve, and teach one another. So students would be active, even online. So we designed the courses to be very interactive, to involve a lot of engagement and give students opportunities to act. The last decision we made about the courses was they would all be taught in English. We knew eventually these things would go across the earth, but we felt strongly that there was so much value to an individual to be able to read, write, and speak English that it was imperative that we teach it in English, not in the local language. Now, the second thing we did is we combined these basic courses in life skills, math, and English in a one-year program to help people prepare to go to school. So we didn't just put them right into a degree program. We said, look, you need to get ready. And that involved building skill and building confidence. So, and we combined that with a religious education course at one of the church's institutes. Now, we also decided to use the same courses in our one-year program, and of course, eventually in the degree programs, as used on campus. So these are legitimate college-level courses taught on the campus at BYU Idaho. We're going to teach them also in Pathway. We also built in the idea of gathering face-to-face once a week for the religious education, but also for an academic discussion led by one of the students in the class. And that would be supervised by what we call church service missionaries. These are local, typically they're couples, often retired, who agree to spend about 10 hours a week working with the students in that class that's in that particular location. So that was some of the key elements. And then there were a couple of others. One is we decided to put the direction of the program at the local level under local church leaders. So we wanted the church leaders to think of this as their program. So this wasn't, here's BYU Idaho coming to help you. And then coming down here and then you help us. We said, look, we want to support you in strengthening and lifting the people in your local area. And so we put them in charge. That meant they called the local missionaries. They provided space and logistical support, especially technology, and they helped to recruit and support the students. We also set tuition low. We wanted to make the program affordable, and that also applied to the degree program. So we set the domestic tuition at $65 per credit hour. Now in 2009, when we launched, $65 a credit hour was about a quarter of what it was costing typically in online programs that we competed with. And then internationally, we tied it to the country income level. So for example, if it's 65 in the US, in Haiti, the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, it was going to be like, 3 or 5. I mean, it's going to be really low, but commensurate with the income level of the country. So we said, we are not in this business to generate revenue for BYU Idaho. That's not what we're doing. We are in this business to create access and bless the lives of the students. We also made the program open to members of the church at that time, but without an ecclesiastical endorsement. In all the other church institutions, like BYU, in order to attend, you have to be endorsed by your bishop and your stake president. It says, your church leaders that say, this student is currently living and will live the honor code, all of the different requirements that are there. But we didn't require that in Pathway. We said, we want you no matter what your situation in life is. So even if you've kind of taken a detour and your life is a mess, maybe even, you might be on drugs. We don't know what your life is, but it doesn't matter. If you're willing to try, we want you to come in, because we wanted to help people through education to come in and have that experience. We also said that there's a way to get into an accredited degree program through Pathway. And this was huge. This was actually really huge. We said, if you get a B average in this first year in the introductory program, which is now called Pathway Connect, if you get a B average, we will admit you into BYU Idaho's online certificate degree programs. You don't need a high school graduation. You don't need any kind of minimum high school GPA, and you don't need any test scores. So for a lot of these students, this was huge. Now it's turned out, interestingly, it's worked out great. If you can get a B in Pathway, you'll do fine at BYU Idaho. It's going to be a lot of work for you, but you'll be okay. So those were some really important things. Now there's one other thing that we decided to do, and that was to kind of change, quote, the path that students take in higher education. We said the first thing, and this was in our design, we said the first thing you do after you get through our Pathway Connect program, if you matriculate into the university, the first thing I want you to do is get a certificate. It's typically 5 courses in a particular field like IT or sales, or could be engineering of some kind, whatever it was. Get a certificate first. So this idea of certificate first turned out to be huge, because if you do, instead of going right into general education, you're working on stuff you're interested in, you're gaining skill that you can market. You have a marketable skill, and you gain confidence. And that turned out to be a huge thing. So that was important. And then from the certificate could stack into an associate's degree and then to a bachelor's degree if you wanted to go all the way to a bachelor's degree. So that was important, because we found that with certificate first, we get way better persistence all the way to a degree on the part of those students. So it's pretty powerful. Now, it also became clear that Pathway needed to have fundamental objectives, because Pathway is about the whole person. That's true of all education in the church educational system. It's true for you at BYU, that we want to educate the whole person. And so our objectives needed to be fundamental. So the first objective was to get the gospel of Jesus Christ deep in the hearts of the students, to help them to become disciples of Christ. Second is to help students become lifelong learners. We wanted them not only to just kind of get through the program, but we wanted them to learn all through their lives. And the third is to help the students increase their capacity to lead and support a family. So that's the 3 objectives. And they're both temporal and spiritual, and they've been very, very powerful as we designed the program. So we had this design, 2008. We took it to the Board of Trustees, and they approved it to go into pilot in 3 places. And we went first to Nampa, Idaho, Mesa, Arizona, and Manhattan in New York. We wanted to see if we could run it and if it would work. And those were really terrific. And of course, students had, tremendous experiences as they got into the program. So let me share with you a couple of experiences that I had that have really shaped how I feel about Pathway. The first one was, we launched this in September of 2009. About a month later, I was sitting in the conference center in Salt Lake City in General Conference, which happens twice a year. I was listening to the speakers, and while I was there sitting, all of a sudden I got this impression that came. And the impression was, you need to go back to the board right now, and you need to expand this program, and you need to take it international. And I thought to myself, we don't have any data. We just started. We're 1 month into Pathway. We don't know anything yet. but I felt really strongly I need to do it. And that's what we did. We went back to the board, got permission to do that study, come back to them with a proposal, which we did in January of 2010. And they approved it. They approved expansion. We added 10 more sites in domestically, and internationally we went to Ghana in Africa and to Mexico. So that was a really amazing experience. And we learned a lot over the next several months as we began to develop the program. Learned a lot about training of missionaries, the local missionaries, training, preparing the students better, communicating better, the curriculum, just lots and lots of things. And the program got better and better. And over the years, of course, the program's grown significantly, but we've never lost sight of why we did it. We were trying to reach out to people who, didn't have opportunity. So let me share with you just a couple of experiences we had that really, really, I hope will help everybody understand how powerful education is in the lives of people everywhere, but especially people who have not had any hope. Because one of the most powerful things that education does, it gives people hope. So here's a story of Valerie. I'll use that name for it. And she, not long after we launched Pathway, we held a conference on campus and we invited a bunch of Pathway students to come. And they were on a panel. And she was the first person to speak. We handed her the mic, and the moment she spoke, I knew, oh, I'm listening to a really amazing person. She picked up that mic and she said, first thing out of her mouth, she said, I am not the 90 and 9. I am the 1. Referencing that parable where Christ said, if you leave the 99, go after the 1, you're doing the right thing. So she said, I'm not the 90 and 9, I'm the 1. And then she said, and Pathway rescued me. So here's her story. When she was 16 years old, she'd grown up in the church. She'd been active in the church. But when she was 16 years old, she got pregnant. And she kind of had wandered off the path a bit. And she and her boyfriend got in trouble and she got pregnant. But they decided to get married. So she was married at 16. She dropped out of high school. She was a good student. She dropped out of high school. She got married and she went to work. She had a baby. And for 12 years, she had 2 more kids, raised them, worked, but she always had a dream that she would go to college. It had been her dream. And then she got pregnant and had kids and she never made it. One day, and all that 12 years, she was not active in the church at all. She was really far away. Well, her mother heard about Pathway and called her up and said, Valerie, you have to go to this meeting where they're introducing this program. So she went and she couldn't believe her ears. Here was a way of getting into higher education. So she started and it was amazing. And in fact, it brought her back to the church. So it changed her spiritual life. And it turns out Valerie has tremendous talent. She's amazing. I had the pleasure of being, years later now, I had the pleasure of being at her graduation. She graduated with a bachelor's degree from BYU Idaho that she earned online after she'd finished that first year of Pathway. And it was amazing to talk to her and listen to her, and her kids were so excited for her. And she was on fire because she had, she'd come to realize her dream and she had hope in her life. And that was the amazing thing. Valerie, compared to all the people, say, who were active in church or were on their way to college, for some of her leaders in the church and even some of the people in education, she's invisible. They can't see her. Well, that's what we learned. We talked to a lot of people, like, for example, in Mesa, Arizona, one of our first sites, about a year after the program was launched, the missionary couple came to us and said, this program will never work. No one's interested in it. The leaders of the church don't support it around here. It's just not going to work. And it's true, the leaders didn't support it. They didn't see the need for it. And the reason was all the people who needed it were invisible to them, at least as far as education was concerned. Same thing happened in Washington, D.C. This one happened to me personally. I talked to a church leader there, and he said, "Oh, we don't need Pathway here." I said, "Really? Why not?" And he said, "Well, we have this great program we run and give scholarships to students to go to Southern Virginia University in, not far from here." And I said, "Well, how many people are in that program?" He said, "Oh, 25. And I said to him, "Well, do you have any young adults in this area who are not making progress in their lives, who are kind of, struggling?" And he said, "Oh yeah, there are hundreds of them." And I said, "Well, Pathway is for them." And he thought about that, and I think he was shocked. He said, "Oh, I didn't understand that. I didn't see that." Well, happily, in both Mesa and Washington, D.C., Pathway is thriving because finally the church leaders figured out, oh, this is education for all those people that are struggling, that are not making progress. They don't have hope in their lives. And Pathway opens that door. And by the way, we also know that if Pathway becomes part of the ministry of those leaders, those local leaders, it will work. It becomes really effective. So all of those things have been really amazing as we've watched, Pathway grow. Pathway is part of the great work of opening up opportunities and breaking down barriers to learning and education. I just want to share with you one quote from the Book of Mormon that is really amazing, because this quote comes from a time in the history of the people in the Book of Mormon, which addresses society in the Americas who were had come, their ancestors had come from the Middle East into the Americas, and these people believed in Christ and had built up a great civilization. And yet, just before his birth in Bethlehem, here in the New World, they were in a society that was prosperous, but in a spiritually dangerous state. Let me read this to you. And as I read it, think about our own society in our world, okay? And you'll hear the analogy. "It came to pass in the 29th year, there began to be some disputings among the people, and some were lifted up unto pride and boastings because of their exceedingly great riches, yea, even unto great persecutions. For there were many merchants in the land, and also many lawyers and many officers. And the people began to be distinguished by ranks according to their riches and their chances for learning. Yea, some were ignorant because of their poverty, and others did receive great learning because of their riches." Well, we live in a world society just like that, where there is great inequality in opportunities for education and learning. And even in a country as developed and as wealthy as the United States of America, 40% of people between the ages of 18 and 30 have a high school education or less. And almost 20% of people between 18 and 30 have some college but left without getting any kind of degree. So this is a time when education beyond high school is so important, both in providing economically for yourself and your family, but also in giving you opportunities to grow and to learn and to be engaged in the society in which you're part of, and have hope in your life. And we know from our experience with BYU Pathway and the Pathway program that much of this gap we see between people who are able to go to college and able to finish and do well, and all the other people, has its roots in absence of access to an opportunity for education and learning. So that's what Pathway is designed to do. Pathway is for the invisible. It's for what we now call the hidden many who are out there hungry for education. And it's just been amazing to see. So Pathway, as you said, is now in 150 countries. It's grown rapidly. In fact, it's amazing to think about the growth. It's just been miraculous. I mean, we started with about if you look at the whole year of 2009, there's about 450 people, 50 in the first year, and there were about 400 people that already were studying in online degrees. By 2011, when the program is approved by the board, we had 1,639 people, okay? By 2015, so 4 years later, there were 28,523. And by 2019, there were 44,482. And it looks like in 2020, we'll be well over 50,000 by the fall semester. So Pathway has really grown. And it's been astonishing, but it is always good to remember that there are many, many more people out there, both inside the church and outside the church, who are hungry for education and who, don't have hope, who are looking at a future that to them seems devoid of hope and change, and education can change that. Now, the Pathway is now open. Pathway Connect, the first year of the program, and the degree programs are now open to people who are not members of the church, if they've got a connection to the church. And also Pathway is now using virtual gatherings as well as face-to-face, because there are many people who, for one reason or another, could not gather once a week. And so now they've opened up virtual gatherings. So Pathway continues to grow. And as it grew, we decided it was going to be really important to have an organization that could take responsibility for all those students and coordinate all the online course development, online degrees, and certificates across the whole educational system. And that's why we created BYU Pathway Worldwide. We moved Pathway from Rexburg, Idaho, where BYU Idaho is, down to Salt Lake. We took the president of BYU Idaho at the time, Clark Gilbert, and made him the president of BYU Pathway Worldwide. And with a relatively small staff, they now manage all those people. There's a great partnership between BYU Pathway Worldwide and BYU Idaho. BYU Idaho continues to provide tremendous oversight of faculty and curriculum. BYU Pathway Worldwide focuses on supporting the students and interacting with them in all the ways that they need. And they're doing some amazing things now, learning how to mentor students, how to improve their access to the courses they need, and so forth. So those have been some of the really powerful experiences we've had. Let me just summarize by giving you a little review of the three main objectives we started with. We now have lots of evidence that, in fact, the gospel does get down into people's hearts. We know that it helps them become lifelong learners, and we know it helps them increase their temporal well-being and ability to earn money, but also learn how to lead and support a family. And it's affecting, literally thousands and thousands of people. You mentioned that we're in about 150 countries today, over 500 locations. There are, as I mentioned last year, about almost 45,000 students during the year that studied there. But let me also mention a couple of other things that I think are really interesting and important for people to understand. One is that in Pathway Connect, the first year of the program, we're now at about almost 50-50 US and Canada and international students. The international student body is growing quite a bit faster than the domestic and Canadian student body. So that's really interesting. We've had, over the course of the decade, about 50,000 people have completed the first year Pathway Connect, which is interesting. We have about 19,000 people in online degree programs right now. And one thing that's really fascinating is that their average GPA in those online courses is at almost a 3.5. So the idea of getting into getting into a degree program with a B average in Pathway is really proving out. Last thing I'll just point out is that we've got about 116,000 students who have participated in Pathway in this last decade. And my guess is that if we take a look at this in 2030, we look back 10 years to 2020, we will be likewise astonished at the growth of Pathway in the next 10 years because there's so many people who need this education. And I just like to conclude my comments on BYU Pathway with this thought that when you think about BYU Pathway Worldwide and you think about the Pathway program, I think it's important to think about it that it's not just another online educational organization. It's a really powerful new way of pursuing higher education. Now, I know from my own experience as I've watched this develop in the church that BYU Pathway Worldwide and the Pathway program are part of an ongoing effort all across the church to strengthen the members of the church and to reach out to people all across the earth who are looking for something better in their lives, who have a hunger for education and a desire to have a better life, not just economically, but spiritually, emotionally, socially, have more connection in their life, have more love, have more opportunities to serve. That's what BYU Pathway Worldwide is all about. It's a great blessing to be involved in it, and I'm grateful to my Heavenly Father. He gave me that opportunity.
Awesome, President Clark. We're super grateful for all that you've shared with us today. Thank you for your time. Is there any, last words for those watching?
So for everybody watching, I know you're all interested in education and business. I just want to say to the students, this is a tremendous time in the history of the world. We are we're in obviously a really challenging time right now, but there's so much opportunity to make a difference in the world. I hope you'll always remember that and make that part of the goal of your life, is to really make a difference for good in your life. For those of you who are teaching, all I have to say is God bless you. Teaching is a noble profession. And people who go into teaching, who love ideas and want to create new ideas and help students, it's a great, great profession. There's a lot of turmoil in universities right now, but I know that the commitment of the teachers, the faculty, is the saving grace of education in this country. And I hope and pray that we'll come to see ways in which we can improve it and make it work better. And I just say, God bless you. So thank you.
Awesome. President Clark, thank you so much. Thank you all for tuning into President Clark's keynote, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.